Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to the Grand Boulevard Coalition show. For this evening, it's going to be just me again today. William has left me in charge this Thursday for the session or the show today. Just a little bit about me again. My name is Cynthia Alvarez and I work with Chicago Area Project. And what I do is I work as a case manager and we work with people who need more help surrounding the issues of substance misuse. That can relate to alcohol, tobacco, nicotine products, and other kinds of substances as well. We also work with adults and youth, and we go work with other organizations and coalitions to meet with youth groups and other adult groups as well to educate and help spread prevention information. So that's a little bit about what we do. So we just had a session at one of our partner organizations known as LOS, which is Latino Organization of the Southwest. And we met with them last Saturday. We did a group with about 8 youth in their organization on Saturday, and we talked about the topics surrounding marijuana misuse and underage misuse of marijuana. So we talked about the risks and other possible things that can happen if youth are using or misusing marijuana. And we do plan to have another session next month. I will probably discuss more of that topic at a later time, which will be surrounding the subject of fentanyl. So the next time I come back, I'll bring a flyer which will show our dates, times, and where we will have that session. So I hope you all stay tuned in and join me for the next session when I come back in April. So a couple things before we get started today with the topic is I wanted to show some flyers here. Some flyers to show some other upcoming events and webinar sessions that we have with Chicago Area Project and Grand Boulevard Coalition. So if I can show the flyer, we can see if I can show this flyer that will show the Winter Youth Talks. I should change it to spring now because spring just happened on the 20th of March. So I will probably have to change that name to Spring Youth Talks. But before that, I just wanted to say happy Social Work Month. It's still the month of March, so I just wanted to congratulate social workers for having a whole month. So, if you know a social worker, please remember to say thank you and to let them know that you appreciate them in whatever workspace they're in, whether they're in schools, organizations, and other types of programs too. Just remember to thank a social worker today or this month. Give them a little something, or a hug or a thank you. Anything is very appreciated. So what I'll go into a little bit today before showing the flyers again. This week is actually National Drug and Alcohol Facts Week. So we will be discussing some information revolving drug and alcohol facts. So this can be any kinds of, we'll get a little more into it later in today's topic. So that's what I'll be going into today, information that I have gathered from the National Institute on Drug Abuse and from the CDC as well. That's what we'll be getting into for today's show. And if I can show the flyers, we'll see if I can show these flyers. We'll see if I can show. So we have 2 flyers here. If not, I can just go over these flyers. We have a flyer for the upcoming Youth Talk, which will be March 25th. And that's coming up this Saturday, and this will be over Zoom. We have these youth talks, so we aim to provide educated, helpful, and pro-social information through safe and peaceful venues for youth ages 13 to 20. So if you are between that age range or know anyone between that age range who may be interested, please let us know. Refer them to Healthy Living, our #1 goal, where we post on our Facebook and Instagram at Healthy Living. So CAP at Healthy Living is one of our social medias on Facebook. And Healthy Living CAP is our Instagram, I believe. So if you search those through your social medias, you'll be able to find us, and the flyers that we post, we try to keep them updated by one of our wonderful staff, Lakita, who updates the flyers every time. So yeah, that's going to be this Saturday, 1 p.m. To 1:45, so 45-minute session. And this upcoming youth talk will be hosted by one of our fabulous interns from Chicago State University. So her name is Narestis, and she's been with us since the beginning of January. So she is very much looking forward to having a discussion with you all and with youth who are interested in having a discussion. So it'll be revolving. So there's no determined topic as of right now. So there's a couple topics that she was interested in talking to you all about. So they're both very interesting. If you're interested in either learning about homelessness in Black and Brown communities, and the other topic was social media, youth effects of social media use. So that was going to be one of the topics. So stay tuned for that. If you want to join on Saturday, it will be either one of those topics, which is going to be very interesting to talk about and have a discussion on. And not this Friday, but next Friday, we're having a 5 o'clock Fridays session. And those sessions are mostly specifically geared towards mental health and wellness webinars. So we do any kinds of topics revolving around mental health and wellness, so things that you can do to just take care of yourselves. And they're bi-weekly meetings that we have over Zoom as well, which makes it very convenient for anyone who wants to join. We like to keep it open to people of all ages. And those sessions are usually hosted by one of our other interns at Chicago Area Project, and they're usually hosted by Annie, which is a UIC intern. She goes to the University of Illinois at Chicago, and she is a social work major, as is Narestis. And they're both doing their masters, which we're very excited and happy for them to kind of continue their education, further their career and knowledge in social work, which is really admirable. And that is going to be next Friday, March 31st, I believe, 30th or 31st. This flyer needs to be updated, so it's probably for the best if we don't show this flyer. We don't want to confuse anyone with the date on here. But this session that's coming up will be hosted by one of our other interns, Claudia, who is taking over this 5 o'clock Friday session for Annie. So Claudia will be hosting this session, and she wants to focus on and have a session about self-care discussion. So it's going to be a self-care discussion with an activity. So details on that will be sent out next week when we send out emails. And if we are able to show the flyer, we will have a QR code where people can scan, or like I said, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, CAP Healthy Living, or Healthy Living CAP on Instagram. So those two places are where you can find our flyers with more information about when and what the topic will be for that day for next week. So we hope that you all will be able to join us. And yeah, so we'll get right into this topic. The topic, as I mentioned, is mostly going into National Drug and Alcohol Facts Week. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to talk a little bit. It's a very broad subject, and there's a lot to discuss when it comes to substances, alcohol use, and substance misuse in general. There can be so many sessions or so many shows and episodes we can do just focusing on the various different topics revolving drug and alcohol use. But for today, we're going to keep it very general. And so, yeah, just some stuff. Like I mentioned, we gathered information from the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the CDC. We'll start off with saying, some people can be aware of the negative effects that drugs have on their health and in their life and still struggle to stop using them. So we're thinking about, alcohol or any substance that can be addictive. So things that are potentially addictive will go more into a list of some examples. But as I mentioned, what our organization tries to do and what my specific program, Healthy Living, our number one goal, tries to do is to try to talk about substance use, misuse, and education and prevention. So we hope to use our sessions that we have with youth and adults to kind of guide people away from misusing drugs or being safe. So what our goal is not, we are not promoting abstinence. We ideally would like people to abstain because that is the safest way to avoid these potential risks and consequences. But if people are going to use, we are going to give them ways and ways to be safe, ways to prevent any overdose or any other types of misuse from happening. So that is the objective of our organization, of our program. And so, we try to educate, and a lot of people are aware of the dangers of substance use and misuse. But sometimes for people who have already started using, it's hard for them to stop even once they know about those risks. And that is when you kind of go into a problem known as substance use disorder. And that is something that can be diagnosed by a psychiatrist. This is what happens when there's repeated drug use. And that can lead into changes in the brain, which can make it hard for people to stop using drugs. Once their brain has been kind of affected by these drugs, people become reliant on it, they think about this substance often. For example, teenagers are leaning a lot towards vaping. There's been a lot of, reports of high vape use with younger generations, not just teenagers, but youth in general. Is where vaping has gotten really popular. And sometimes in the day-to-day with youth who might be addicted to vaping, they think about it often. They're agitated if they don't get to vape. Sometimes kids will go to the bathroom at their school to try to use their vape. People share vapes sometimes at schools. So there's, different ways, different substances that teens and adults can get addicted to. So let's see, even when people want to stop, this happens. When this happens, the person is experiencing a medical problem known as substance use disorder, as I mentioned, which is something that can be diagnosed by a psychiatrist. And addiction is a severe form of substance use disorder. And all addictive drugs cause the brain to release the chemical known as dopamine. And dopamine is usually released after pleasurable and satisfying activities. So some of these drugs can release dopamine in the brain. So that's something that just is a rewarding factor when using drugs. It makes someone feel really good. With marijuana, for example, it gives that high effect, which can make people feel very relaxed. It really depends on the person too, because drugs impact people differently. For some people, it really relaxes them, and that can have that rewarding effect that dopamine gives. So some addictive drugs and substances, as I mentioned, alcohol, marijuana, products containing nicotine like vapes and cigarettes as well. Also, certain opioids, or all opioids, and others. Those are just a couple examples of addictive substances. And use of injection drugs such as heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and methamphetamines have high risk of infection and blood-borne diseases such as HIV and hepatitis, which are both incurable, but they're treatable. So as I mentioned with my program, we do focus on substance use, misuse, prevention, and education, and we also focus on sexual health, which includes HIV prevention and education. So as I just mentioned, all forms of injection drugs can have a high risk for bloodborne diseases because people may share needles. For example, if you use a needle to inject a drug into your body and you share that needle with someone else, there's a possibility for blood being mixed in with the needle, because if the needle's not cleaned or sterilized and then given to someone else, or if it's being reused. If people are using the same needle more than once, that can also lead to a possible chance of HIV infection. And HIV and hepatitis are not curable, but there are different forms of treatments. There's medications, there's pills that people can take to help prevent from spreading HIV to another person. Because as we know, HIV can also be the other main form of passing HIV is through sexual contact. So that can be through sexual contact. So that's something that's potentially dangerous for people who may not know they have HIV and they're spreading it if they're having unsafe sex, unprotected sex, and if they are not using the proper medication and treatment for that. So that's something that can be dangerous. And it's important to get tested as well for people who may be using injection drugs or having unprotected sex. It's important to have a conversation with the person that they're in sexual contact with, and also just getting tested if they're unsure. So moving on to polysubstance use. So this is something that involves when someone takes two or more substances at the same time. So they are taken together or within a short time period, either intentionally or unintentionally. So mixing substances or drugs are never safe because of the effects of combining drugs. They may be stronger and more unpredictable than one drug alone, and can even be deadly as well. So some facts that I got from the CDC is that over 250 people in the U.S. die every day due to substance misuse and overdose. And in 2019, nearly half of the drug overdose deaths involved multiple drugs. So multiple drugs being found in their system. We'll go more into what that could be. And also, I wanted to share an article that I had found just to discuss that I had a meeting with staff and we talked about some new potential drugs that's being popularized as of recently. An article from the New York Times from January talked about a recent emerging new mixed substance involving veterinary tranquilizer known as psilocybin and fentanyl, and so that those two drugs mixed together is known as tranq dope. And psilocybin is a veterinary tranquilizer, and this causes wounds that can erupt with scaly dead tissue called eschar, and untreated, if it's left untreated, that can lead to amputation, which has happened. And in the article, they talk with a woman who has used fentanyl. Unbeknownst to her, it had psilocybin in the fentanyl she was using, and she had passed out and realized moments later that that drug was much stronger than what she has normally taken in the past. Her arm ended up getting infected and they had to amputate. So this is something that has happened in real life and has happened recently. It has been emerging in a couple different states. And so this is something that has been recent, which is a scary new thing because you never know what is in your drugs. So it is very important to test. So as I mentioned, some people may not even know what their drugs have been laced with, which can lead to dangerous outcomes such as an overdose. As I mentioned, it's important to test your substances before using. So if someone is going to use, it is important to make sure you're testing your substances, especially if you're getting your drugs from unsafe avenues, such as a dealer or other things like that. If you're not purchasing from a store directly or getting medicine that's prescribed from a doctor that you're using, it's very important to make sure you're testing your drugs. And there are things that we have at my organization, Chicago Area Project, and with my program of healthy living, our number one goal, we do have fentanyl test strips. And so that is something that can be used for people who are using substances. Fentanyl itself is a very dangerous and highly addictive substance. And that is something that you need to be on the lookout for. A lot of youth do not know about what fentanyl is, which is why our program strives to go to different schools and talk about that subject, because there can be drugs, pressed pills, for example, that have been found to be laced with fentanyl because it's cheaper to make pressed pills when you add fentanyl in it, because then you're using less of the other substance that they're trying to sell, which can be Xanax, for example. And it's very hard to tell visibly what a fake pill looks like and what a real pill looks like. Next time I remember we can show a picture, but it's so hard to tell the difference between what a real pressed pill was versus a pressed pill that had fentanyl in it. It looks very, very similar, so that can be dangerous. So fentanyl test kits can be given for free. And other organizations as well have fentanyl test kits. And Narcan, which is a nasal spray that can be used to help reverse an overdose from happening. So before an overdose takes effect and potentially kills someone, this Narcan nasal spray can help prevent that overdose and reverse the effects of an overdose. It is very important to be aware of what overdoses look like. Just making sure that if you know someone is using, that they're being safe and that they have someone supervising over them. Maybe someone that's not using can just be next to the person who is using to make sure they're being safe. That's very important. And Narcan is also available for free in Chicago, specifically. Looking into that, I have found that public libraries in Chicago offer Narcan for free. So if that is something that you feel like is important to have in your house, please look into that and find the closest public library to you. And yeah, being under the influence of any addictive drug can have a higher risk of sexual assault, overdose, being involved in aggressive or violent altercations, driving under the influence, which can lead to car accidents, and risky sexual behaviors, and more. So there's a long list of many different risks that people can have once you're under the influence. If it gets to the point where it sometimes can get to the point where people don't remember what happened. So it can be very hard to know if someone was sexually assaulted or not. And that can be a scary thing for a lot of people. And it's a reality for a lot of people too. If they're going to parties, if they're going to someone's house who maybe they may not know so well, or even someone that they feel like they trust too. There's just so many different people that you need to be cautious of. And it's important to just be safe in general. And it is especially important for youth to understand the risks of misuse of drugs early to help prevent any of these things. And yeah, it is important to understand that taking drugs prescribed from a doctor is fine and should be taken only as prescribed. And medical marijuana is also safe when used responsibly as a prescribed and used as prescribed by a medical professional. So just remember to always be safe. Our goal is not to tell people drugs are bad, don't do drugs, but please be aware of the risks that can happen. We hope that you all stay safe. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. As I said, happy Social Work Month. Remember to thank a social worker, and I hope you all are able to attend our sessions in the future. And please have a good rest of your night, and thank you so much for your time. And yeah, thank you.